The elusive concept of age, training age versus chronological age. So, let's talk about that. All right. I'm going to try to keep this concise. I'm going to try to keep this in a straight, direct line. We both know that's not going to happen. So, what I think is great is that my camera is at an angle. No, that's just cynicism. That's not real humor. Um, that the exercises that are great for beginners aren't necessarily great for advanced lifters, and there's a number of reasons for that. That most of the time, when someone wants to gain muscle, it's because they don't have very much. So they don't need to focus on a body part like the middle delt. They don't need to focus on a body part like the lateral head of the tricep. They want to grow arms, and you have no idea what they mean. Do they mean the entire delt and upper arm? Do they mean the upper arm alone? Do they mean the upper arm and lower arm? Do they mean everything from the AC joint down to the wrist? What's their definition of arm? Because no one uses a dictionary when they decide what they're going to say. They all have these unique, this is what the word arms means to me type approaches of views on how to use words. Nothing is specific, everything is just some vague blob of a word. So it's important to find out what they want. So, but I would digress. So a beginner just needs muscle everywhere. Hypothetically, not their waist, although you see lots of people doing side bends, and you're like, oh, you're trying to grow your waist, huh? And they're like, it's like, why do you say that? And it's like, because you're doing the one exercise that makes your waist bigger. And they're like, I thought this is to tone. It's like, there is no such thing as toning. Everyone knows that, which is now offensive to say that. So that, if boys can have periods and give birth, and I guess there's toning now. So, like unicorns playing cards while in detention. So, with herpes. And yeah, it's like, how do you know that those unicorns have herpes? It's like, can you prove that unicorns don't have herpes? And then they're like, because they're mad because you just caught them, because they'd have to prove unicorns exist to then prove they don't have herpes. And since you can't prove unicorns exist, you can't prove unicorns don't have herpes. So, yeah, I guess in some hypothetical universe where feelings matter more than facts, side bends make sense. And so you have to entertain this bullshit. But let's pretend that we live on a planet where there's something approaching objective reality, and that feelings have no bearing in science. That feelings don't have any impact on facts at all, and that we deal only in facts in this realm called science. And in that realm, it's very vague because every individual is different, which is awful because it kind of validates their feelings when we're trying to prove that the feelings don't matter. But the point is, heavy shit puts muscle everywhere. Everywhere. And it also is exhausting as it gets heavier. So if you're doing, let's say, a bent over barbell row, this is a perfect example of a non-supported, non-specific, high bracing, high fatigue, raw stimulus magnitude lift. Is you pick a bar up and you bring it into your sternum. If you got long limbs, it'll hit your lats. If you got short limbs, bring it into your hips and it'll hit your lats. It's going to hit your traps. It's going to hit your rhomboids. It's going to hit all of your rear delts. It's going to use your glutes as an isometric contraction, unless you're using a lot of body English, and it's going to use your glutes too. It's going to use your hamstrings for isometric contraction. It's going to use your quads, your calves. So you're using 90% of your body to do this fucking exercise for your lats. It doesn't even hit your lats that good. But it's great for beginners because it hits everything. It puts muscle everywhere. Right? Is it specific? Fuck no. Does it hit everything? Yeah. Do you look macho because you're slinging 200, 300, 400 pounds? Fuck yeah. Does girls care? Fuck no. They don't even know. They don't even know how much is on the bar. They're like, that's a lot of weight. That's more than I weigh. It's like, I would hope so. It's 400 pounds. It's like, they're like, they don't get it. Anyway, so, The point is, after a while, you're rowing 400 fucking pounds just to hit your lats. And that means that your lower back is handling 400 pounds in a very disadvantageous position for a very long set. You're either ripping through the set in 15 seconds or you're taking your proper 40 to 60 seconds to do that set, which means your lower back is compromised for 40 to 60 seconds when you're not really targeting it. You know what I'm saying? It's like it'll add up. And when lower back gets fatigued, it just gets painful. And then you can't do stuff like squatting and deadlifting. And you're relegated to leg press and glute bridges and shit like that. So the point is when you're only bent rowing 100 pounds and you weigh 150, how much fucking work is your lower back really doing? It's not a whole lot more than when you're tying your shoelaces. But if you're weighing 190 and you're rowing 350, 400 pounds, now it's an enormous amount of work for your lower back to do. And you're not targeting your lower back. That's the key point of this, is that as a beginner, you can do exercises that hit the whole fucking body because the whole body needs muscle. By the time you're strong enough to where certain exercises are going to fuck you up for days in all the wrong places, now it's time to maybe retire that exercise or find a version of it that's a little bit more specific to your goal. So for instance, the thing that you would trade out a bent row for would be a chest supported T-bar row with a lat grip. Or maybe even if you're trying to hit upper back with a wide grip. And then eventually you find the right piece of chest supported rowing equipment for you and you do that. Another example would be the squat, right? You're not a man if you don't squat. That's the common theme, right? Real men squat. Well, the back squat, the low bar back squat, is very advantaged for handling a lot of weight. So you can use more weight, which sounds good, right? It's good for putting on muscle everywhere, including your glutes and your waist. So if your goal is to be as big as possible, like just to stick you in water and displace the most amount of volume of water, then that's great. If you want to look big, then it's about ratios. It's having tiny joints and big bellies of the muscle. It's about having a tiny waist, broad shoulders, and a big quad sweep. So you're not going to get that with a low bar squat for some anatomy. Some people can, some people can't. That depending on your limb length, if you have long legs, you're going to be bending over a lot and it's going to be a lot of stress for your lower back. Whereas if you have short legs, you would widen your stance into more of a frog squat and it still hits your quads. You don't bend over as much, but you hyperload your glutes. So, if you're short legged, you're going to have bigger glutes than quad ratio, maybe a 2-to-1 growth from the squat. So the more you squat, the heavier you squat, the bigger your glutes get, and a little bit your quads grow. So you're trying to grow your quads, and your butt keeps getting bigger, and your waist is slowly creeping up there, in theory. Maybe that's very controversial, but that's a very complex conversation. But it stands to reason, if you're wearing 200 pounds on your shoulders, and the weight has to transmit through your core to get to your legs, then if you put 500 pounds on your shoulders, this core would have to get stronger and thus bigger to support that weight before it's transmitted to the legs. The only way to bypass the core with legs doing a pressing motion is a leg press. But your range of motion tends to suck unless you have long legs. So, in that case, the people that are less prone to getting the big waist are the long limb people who have a smaller pelvis, smaller clavicles, the ectomorphs, that actually they could squat if they didn't account for the whole long leg thing and they had a bag torso bend to it. They end up loading their waist less, so their waist grows less, and they're not prone to getting a big waist. Whereas with the leg press for the long-legged individual, they'd be able to, I'm almost out of time, the long-legged individual would be able to press, in the leg press, get more out of it. Whereas for the short-limbed individual, they'd get more out of a squatting pattern for the quads than the leg press, but ipso facto, they end up loading the glutes and the waist more. So something you need to consider is eventually, as you've been training a long time, it's time to develop more specific training for the body part you're trying to train. That's why people would swap out hack squats. Hack squats focus less on the glutes, more on the quads. You can get deeper even if you have bad ankle mobility or short femurs by moving your feet out in front of you a little bit more. And the idea is you want to target the quads and not the waist. And so therefore with the back squat, barbell back squat, you're lucky if you can get to parallel or a little below, whereas hack squat, you can go much lower than parallel. And that means that you get more knee flexion, which means you get more quad activation, plus your butt doesn't swing back, so the moment arm on the hips isn't so far away from the midline. I'm going to stop this and do a part 2. Okay, part 2. I did that because Instagram doesn't like videos being longer than 10 minutes. So what I'm trying to say is that for a beginner, you would load up a ton of weight on the big compound lifts, a ton of weight for them, so that they're lifting in the 5 to 10 rep range. And like 6 to 8 reps is a great thing for a beginner to use as a barbell movement for the core barbell lifts. And they're not really using that much weight relative to their body weight because they're just not that strong yet because they don't have that much muscle. But as they build up muscle and strength, because they go hand in hand, they can be differentiated to some degree, but for the most part, they're intertwined. You become too strong to do those barbell movements in the amount of volume necessary to continue to grow muscle. The more muscle you grow, the more sets of volume you need to keep growing the muscle, or the more heavy weight. But the bottom line is you're going to get more fatigue. So whether you're doing 500 pounds for 2 sets or 200 pounds for 5 sets, it's still more than the other guy who's doing 100 pounds for 1 set. So as you need more stimulus to get muscle, the more muscle you have to do more weight and usually more reps and more sets, which is more wear and tear on your joints. So as you get older, your joints are more vulnerable, we'll say. Now, is it because of the wear and tear that your chronological age is linked to joint pain? And thus, as you get older, you need to use less relative weight to your maximum lift. So, example, you build the most muscle with something between 5 and 10 reps, right? But as a person over 40, consistently lifting in the 5 to 10 rep range will have its toll on joint and tendon pain for me and for most men, so that lifting 11 to 20 reps does not have the same, if any, joint or tendon pain. So is it because you've worn down these joints that now they're just sensitive, or is it just purely chronological? If you take someone who's never lifted before, throw him in the gym, he's lifting at 40 years old, doing sets of 6, and his joints are going to hurt. Not necessarily, because again, he's a beginner, so they're only using a tiny amount of weight relative to their body weight. But the gist of it is, it's an assumption that as you get older, you go from beginner to intermediate to advanced, so that by the time you're at the upper end of the advanced spectrum and you're over 40, you're a master, then the master's competitor would need so much volume and so much load to even maintain, let alone grow, their existing muscle tissue. Their joints would never hold up. So in order to get more out of the joints, you decrease the load and increase the volume by increasing the rep range even more, so that now, as an older lifter who's theoretically an advanced master, then you can handle enough volume to continue to grow. The problem is people don't really know this. I didn't really know this. I had to restudy all this stuff. That the theory is you need to use the style of training you use to grow the muscle to keep the muscle. So people who lifted heavy barbell movements like power building have to keep power building to keep their muscle. But as they get stronger, as they get more advanced and thus older, their joints are taking a bigger strain from this bigger and bigger loads, and that they can't theoretically keep lifting with the volume they need to at the new weight to maintain, let alone grow more tissue. So the belief is you need to retire because you can't keep growing. So the hypothetical theory is someone like me who lifted in this power building style where you used heavy barbell movements up until you're like 38, and then I switched to Swift machine from like 38 to like 41, 42, and then it's at the point where the strength was so high, I'm doing basically 1 or 2 sets for the big compound movements per week, and that's not enough volume to grow. I've refocused, relearned everything from scratch, and the idea is, and this is something John Meadows talked about that I didn't really pay attention to because it wasn't relevant to me at the time, was that to preserve the existing joints in the advanced over 40 crowd, the masters, that you have to lift in an 11 to 20 rep range with slow controlled motion, in theory close to the original weight you used to use, and then you would titrate up the volume to accommodate for the decrease in load. So let's give you some real world examples so this makes sense. So let's say in 2019, I was incline barbell benching 300 for 5, okay? This became dangerous because people couldn't spot me. So I'm 38 years old, I'm doing 300 for 5 incline benching. People couldn't spot me. Like, maybe they could, maybe they couldn't, but the amount that they took off or the way they handed it off to me affected my ability to track that lift, so that sometimes it's 4 reps, sometimes it's 5 reps, sometimes it's 6 reps. And there's no standardization for depth because there's no one to tell me honestly whether I'm deep enough or not, because it's a different spotter every time. So using a Smith machine was safer, allowed me to standardize it. And basically I'm doing 315 for 9. Or if I'm doing it a couple inches off my chest, I pyramided up over the next few years to where I was doing 340 for 7. Okay, that's a very low rep range for a pretty vulnerable joint at a 41-year-old man. So now the new way of doing it is to go much slower in the eccentric, a micro pause or even a full pause at the bottom, explode up and squeeze the pecs at the top, using a grip that targets my upper chest and my triceps more than just using the grip that lets me handle the most possible weight. Could I lose some white fiber density? Perhaps. So I had to start over again at like 200 pounds, worked my way up to 275, worked my way up all the way till I hit about 315 for 7. They were off the clavicle. They were slower, but not super slow as when I was using 200 pounds. And then I retooled it, switched machines to wash out any type of fatigue to the joints. And then I've now reincorporated them, and I'm using the Smith machine. And I started 275, did 9, the next week 280, got 10. It's time for a deload. It was a very short mesocycle. And then now going to the new mesocycle, my goal is to work the same basic range of motion, the same targeting of the upper pec, the triceps, not the delt, by having my hands if slightly too close rather than slightly too wide, taking it off the rotator cuff and putting it more on the elbow. And then when the elbow's too inflamed, I'll have to rotate where my grip is and then focus more on straightening my rotator cuff and allow my elbow. So it's either I'm out wide and I'm getting my rotator cuff, or I'm in close and I'm getting my elbow. In theory, I can push with my thumbs and it's perfect, but then my thumb, start getting arthritis in your thumb. So you have to rotate these things 2 months with one grip, 2 months with another grip, 2 months with another grip, and you're going to have to change the weight. I'm going to work my way from 275 up to 315. I'll have to start over at 275 when I change my grip, work my way back up to 315. And I'm always going to use the same load, only the difference is instead of doing one work set and a back off set, doing 315 for 9, 225 for 9. Right now, I'm going to be training 2 heavy sets, and then next month, 3 heavy sets, and then next month, 4 heavy sets. So it's 275 for 4 sets, 280 for 4 sets, 285 for 4 sets, 290 for 4 sets. So I may not be using exactly the same amount of load, not using a lot less, but I am increasing the volume. So then a year from now, I might be doing 315, 320, 325, but in a much slower, paused way with a ton more volume. Whereas if I had stuck with one set of heavy barbell lifts, maybe I would have worked up to 365 for 5. Chances are I would have gotten hurt by that point over 3 years in my 40s. So the point is the difference between young man lifting and old man lifting is choosing the safer approach with more volume. So to tie it all together, what I'm trying to say is, that was a lengthy example, but it was a detailed example, that your core heavy barbell movements you would have used as a beginner, like free bar squat, back squat, it's going to hit more glutes, going to hit more waist, and it's going to hit quads, which would be fine to a point, but it gets to a point where your quads are lagging, your glutes is great, and your waist is a little big. Now it's time to switch to the hack squat. That's an advanced maneuver. Sets of 5 to 6 is too heavy for your knee joint. Now it's time to switch to sets of 12 to 15. People are like, well, you're going to lose muscle. Let's think that through. I'm doing 500 pounds for 6 squatting. Now I switch over to, 45-degree angle means half of it's vertical, half of it's horizontal. So let's say 1,000 pounds on a hack squat is equivalent to 500-pound squat, okay? So that would mean a 700-pound hack squat, you might be able to do 12 reps. If you could have done a 1,000-pound hack squat for 5 reps, because you could do 500 Smith squat for 5 reps. So if I'm taking the tension off my waist, I'm taking tension off my glutes, I'm putting more tension on my quads, but my knees, and I'm getting a 700-pound hack squat for 12 reps, I'm still going to be working the quads for growth. They won't get stronger as quickly. Maybe I'll lose a little bit of white fibers that I needed for that 500 pounds vertical, but I'll lose it from my glutes and I'll lose it from my waist. So my waist will get slightly smaller, my glutes might get slightly smaller, my quads will get bigger at a faster rate so that it'll change the distribution so that the actual shape of the body will change from a powerlifter's to a bodybuilder's. For the incline Smith, like we said, going from incline free weight to incline Smith, it allows for better tracking over time, better, safer progression, less chance of injury. There's no rotation this way. There's no rotation this way. There's no wobbling this way. There's no bullshit with the Smith. You take the time to set it up right, you're golden. You don't take the time to set it up right, you're going to get hurt just because you didn't set it up right. There's 3 planes to keep track of, the X, Y, and Z axis. You have to have it balanced in all 3 of those planes. A lot of people don't take that into consideration, where they just put the bench in there, they eyeball it, they're good to go. They don't use like a tape measure or even their thumbs to measure shit. If you use a Smith, then you can track exactly where to bring it down to where the shoulders start to hurt and put the chocks up so it stops. So you come down, tap, go, tap, go, tap, go. And you basically use you have it stop before it would hurt, not at the point that it hurts. And you're like, well, I'm losing range of motion. And it's like, but you're preserving the life of the joint. And you might use less weight at first, but you will use more weight later, and you have to turn up volume because you're older. You're using you're using more reps for more sets. And you may be using less weight at first, but because you will be able to keep growing, you will eventually catch up to your old weight. So all those white fibers you used to handle your 300 pounds or your 500 pounds, they go dormant when you go to 250 and 400. Well, once you catch back up to that, they will reactivate. The cells are still there, they're just smaller. But you're getting them from more volume, so it's going to be more productive. So that is the big crux of the matter is when you're young, you can do heavy barbell movements, really heavy in the 5 to 10 range for very little sets, very infrequently, and you will grow. Like a Dorian style programming works great when you're young. But when you get older, you're going to need to switch to higher volume, safer training like machines with more reps. Like instead of one set of 6 beyond failure with a barbell, you'll use a machine or a Smith machine and you'll do 3 sets of 10 to 15, none of which is beyond failure. You will get more volume. You will get more weight total. And yes, some of those 2x explosive fibers are not going to be activated because you're not lifting 85% of your 1 rep max. You're lifting 70 to 75% of your 1 rep max. But once you catch up to where you were before and you're using that same load but for more reps, those fibers will activate. You will never get the explosive, monstrous growth of lifting super heavy, but you're also not trying to look like a lumpy, bumpy Mr. Potato Head. You already have that big raw mass. It's time to now pick what's weak and isolate those weak points and bring those weak points up to catch up to the big points. And the bigger points might actually recede a little bit, but the muscle, it's not like the energy is getting wasted. The energy is redistributing into where you want it to go. And then once you have the balanced physique you want, if you persist, you will reactivate those areas that had shrunk to accommodate the shift in focus. That's the key. Is ironic, there is a interview with Kamal Algarni on RBP Fuad's channel, and he pretty much says the same thing. I don't know, he says it in short. It's not as long-winded as my 30-minute diatribe of this bullshit, but he does say it, and his gist is, I do 3 sets of 15. So, yeah, if I could get 20, I don't go for 20. I just do 3 sets of 15. If I get 3 sets of 15, I add weight for next week. With that type of attitude, eventually you're going to catch up. So if, let's say he was 30 years old and he was doing a set of 8 with 200-pound dumbbell, with 150-pound dumbbells, right? And now he's 51 and he's doing 3 sets of 15 with 150-pound dumbbells, motherfucker's stronger. Because you know he could do 200 for 8. He just doesn't. Because he doesn't need to. Because he's growing muscle and preserving his joints. Rule number 1 is don't get hurt. And so that's the thing is, for those guys out there who are like, well, I'm in my late 30s and I'm not hurt yet, but I'm starting to be concerned, this is the opportunity to where instead of chasing numbers on the bar, chase numbers with the bar. So focus on running up your reps and adding sets as your progressive resistance model, rather than work on increasing the load. Because if you're in the boat that I'm in, where I had to drastically reduce the loads I was using in order to shift to a new way of training, I lost a lot of size and it was very depressing. It took me about a year to catch back up to where I was before, to where my working weights with the slow, controlled, higher reps and more volume training is about the same as what the working weight was. You know, like I said, when I first started this training, I was doing 135 on the Smith as opposed to 315 for bench. And quickly caught up to 200-pound squats. Went from 500-pound squats to 140 pounds squats. Had to work my way back up to 400, but that was 400 slow and controlled with a pause, no knee wraps, and no belt, versus 455 for the same depth, for the same reps. So even just the 50 pounds alone is more than accounted for with the tempo and the pause, let alone that I wasn't using gear to assist because I was never having any joint problems because I was never lifting heavy. Since then, I've been doing both. You know, like I've been handling a ton of weight on the hack squats for high reps, and I've even tried multiple sets. So I've now at that critical point where I'm now regrown most of my old muscle and I'm putting on new muscle. Took a year to repopulate this attempt, relearn how to do the old stuff, but taking this year has allowed me to receptor map out my gear loads with blood work to find exactly the right place to be. Found out exactly, or very close to exactly, how much volume each body part needs and how much total volume ends up putting me into a state of overtraining, and also exactly how many calories is enough to stimulate growth. Like I have a boundary, like 4,000, nothing happens. 4,500, I grow too fast. 4,300, I was growing slow, but slow is good, because at 43 years old and I've already got 100 pounds of mass on me, growing more muscle is almost impossible. So if you grow a pound a month, it's not even that's all muscle. Like, you can't even grow a pound of muscle a month at this point. So there's no reason for me to grow more than a pound a week. So growing 2-3 pounds a week is senseless. So you end up shooting for about a pound a week, even though you know that at the end of the month you're going to have maybe 1 pound of muscle and 3 pounds of fat for that month. But if you only slower than that, it's so slow, the amount of variability from water and food volume is going to account for more than the actual amount of tissue gained. So that at the end of the month, if you're only up 2 pounds, it may not even register out, because the temperature and humidity levels of your environment could have a bigger impact on your water retention as a total. Oh, I went over again. Fuck. All right. So, big picture here is, if you want help with coaching, if you find this interesting, check out apexcoaching.com, myapexcoaching.com for coaching. If you go to Apex Coaching, the YouTube channel, we have exercise library and other videos that are high end. Like I said not too long ago, I'm going to go back to doing my old style of videos, which is talking to you like an adult, not marketing you like a moron, which has been, for about 4 years, I tried to do the industry standard, which was market people and talk to them like they're imbeciles. And it didn't really appeal to anyone. I'm going to go back to talking to people the way I would talk to a peer. And hopefully the few people that like this long form discussion will tune in and find these videos more helpful. That I happen to watch long ass videos with really smart motherfuckers telling me smart people shit. And I'm not as good at Joe Bennett as condensing a 50-minute video into 3-minute TikToks. But I'll get there. They won't always be this long. But I think that going back to the old ways is going to work better. And hopefully you guys enjoy these videos. If you like this format of me saying it straight but getting it all out, rather than picking and choosing my words and dumbing it down to keep it short and simple, let me know in the comment section. If it is like a mixed bag where it's too long, but it's better than a 3-minute video, let's say that too. Say whatever the fuck you want, and I won't attack you. That's the old me. I don't slash out at people who attack me in the comments. I just ignore them. All right.